On May 7, 1949, in Hanover, York County, Pennsylvania, Mr. Ray Allen Trone was born. His father, mother, two older sisters, himself, and his younger sister made up the family. Mr. Trone's parents were farmers who also worked in a machine shop and a sewing factory. Mr. Trone is from a long line of heroes and soldiers who fought for America. His grandfather fought in World War I, and his father fought in World War II. Mr. Trone carried on that legacy when he served in the Vietnam War after being drafted and enlisting at the age of 19.
Actually, I received a draft notice, so I looked into my options because at that time there were so many people being drafted and being sent into the infantry that I felt my choices by picking a field would give me less of an opportunity of just being out in the infantry, which were most of the people were being sent to. So I picked a course of study by enlisting, which gave me a skill position within the military.
He then chose his field of study and became a Specialist 5 in the Army. As a Specialist 5, also called a Special Identification Techniques Analyst, he was to use radio transmitters and intercept the Viet Cong's radio transmissions that were through Morse code and translate it.
My particular job was try to find where the location was of a particular unit by analyzing the radio transmitters. We could identify by means of the radio signal of each individual radio transmitter where it was located and pinpoint the location. So we could tell where it was located, and if it moved, identify where it had moved to. So that would give unit commanders ideas of the movement of enemy troops throughout different areas, and we passed that information on to commands so that they could make decisions on how to deploy troops.
Mr. Trone may not have seen a lot of the front line of the war, but he still was involved in a very crucial part of it. Mr. Trone was stationed at Ben Hoa in South Vietnam, which is 30 miles north of Saigon. Ben Hoa, a very large air base and military base, was not a center of attack by the Viet Cong or North Vietnamese. However, it did see a regular shower of mortars. There was only one time Mr. Trone witnessed any casualties.
We had one incident where we took there was only one time that I actually witnessed casualties where we took a direct hit of an incoming mortar on one of the hooches, just probably about 100 yards from where mine was, and we had, I think, four soldiers were killed in that hooch, and a couple others were injured. Fortunately, that was the only time that anybody in my immediate vicinity.
When Mr. Trone was stationed in Vietnam, he constantly wrote letters and communicated with his friends and family back home. The technology wasn't what it is now. There were no cell phones or computer lines, just letters in which to communicate. His mom was his biggest fan and would always write him letters out of her concern for his safety when Mr. Trone wasn't writing letters back home or was on duty. There were different recreational activities that he could partake in. As being part of a base camp, recreational activities were popular. The men on the bases had a lot of downtime to do anything they wanted, and a number of activities were available for them. One resource to spend their time, of course, was the club. At the time, alcohol was very cheap and also available to servicemen. If you were part of the war, you were allowed to drink legally. For Mr. Trone, drinking was not an issue. However, for some men in his unit, they did abuse the alcohol. More activities too, including working out and reading. Reading and working out weren't the main pastime activities to do, but it gave them something to do. For working out, they had a small area that they made, which included some makeshift barbells and equipment. Mr. Trone said you would be surprised what the men could work out and do. The USO had also sent a small library. They sent a few books and magazines over to the men. The main pastime activity was watching movies. Watching the movies also sent by the USO was the popular thing to do. Movies were sent to a camp a few times a week, and the movies were not too far behind the original release date. They were in the middle of the jungle, so a movie theater was not provided, obviously. Mr. Trone stated that watching the movies was pretty cool, though, because it was an outside show. For their movie screens, it was a white billboard, and they had a small projection booth.
Since they had no control over the weather, they also had a giant parachute to cover overhead from possible rain showers. As said before, movies were their favorite thing. The men sometimes would demand to watch the movie twice in a night. The biggest movie of the year while Trone was there was MASH, and they said that they had that movie for about 4 days and watched it about 5 times. When not doing recreational things, the men were following the war. The Viet Cong were the instigators of the Vietnam War. They were known for their radical and unsightly fighting ways. While Trone was there, he said that he did not directly see or be affected by them, though. However, he shared the news that astounded him.
The Vietnamese people were all basically, the North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese were basically all of the same race. So, and it was a split country. So you didn't really know who your enemy was. And it was just the North Vietnamese, whether it be part of the North Vietnamese Army or the Viet Cong, the communist part of some of the communist infiltrators, you didn't know whether they were enemy or not. Some of the they didn't necessarily have to be a soldier per se, a male soldier, because they used their women and children to help in the combat action against our troops. The women helped to carry ammunition, and they actually sometimes engaged in firing weapons against us, and even children sometimes engaged in acts of aggression by dropping grenades at times into some of the facilities that our troops had. So it was a very different kind of war, something that our troops were not really. They were not up to speed at fighting the way these people were doing things.
After a brutal and terrible time, it was time for Mr. Trone to return home. Mr. Trone had entered the war in November of 1969 and left November of 1970. The actual war itself ended in 1974. A full service time has to be 4 years, so Mr. Trone had then to take more courses to finish his career. In March 1972, Trone had completely finished his military career. When he left the military, he left as a personal specialist. Mr. Trone, leaving Vietnam early, he had to be retrained and become a personal specialist. He had spent a year at Fort Lee for training, and that is where he finished his career. Being completely done with the military, he now had a new challenge to overcome, returning home into his community. When Trone left the war, civilians did not view the war as a highly and honorable situation. In fact, he said that soldiers were looked down upon. Trone did not feel comfortable wearing his uniform around because of that. The only time soldiers would wear their uniforms was when they were on duty. Also, adjusting back into civilian life was difficult for Trone. When he had finished his career with the military, he was unsure about what he wanted to do, but there were thousands in the same situation as him. Before he had left for the military, though, he was fortunate to have a job with a trucking company, so when he returned, he started working in the maintenance shop as a mechanic. He then worked his way up the scale from a mechanic, then to manager, then to upper level managing. He had felt accomplished and a lot from starting low and raising high above. He had worked for that company for 35 years. Through his working experiences with the military and his working career, he also traveled a lot and learned to love life more.
It made me realize that life is very precious, and you only have, every person is only given so much time, and nobody knows how much time that is. I think when I saw those people in that one casualty instant that I saw, I really realized that nobody knows how short or long a life that you have. And that made me really respect life, I think, a whole lot differently throughout my whole life. And I think I've enjoyed life a whole lot more throughout life, because I think I've tried to look at each day as, let's have fun today, because you don't know if this may be your last day. You never know that. So you try to have fun every day. And I think that's the attitude that I came away with very early on in life. And I think a lot more people could benefit by learning that early in their lives.